So I want to welcome everyone to our 66th online gathering. This bi-weekly time, at least through November, is now called Courageous Leadership and is sponsored by ELCA's coaching ministry. I'm Jason O'Neill, part of your support team for ELCA Coaching and one of your facilitators today. As a reminder, we hold this brave space in these gatherings for you, the people of the church, to bring the truth of who you are and how you are doing. These conversations are an intentional step to live more fully into God's dream for us as the body of Christ. We invite you to bring curiosity and openness to this gathering and to discerning how and where Spirit might be calling you forward as a leader. What is God saying to you today and in this season of your life? A little bit about our presenter today. Lorna Davis transforms the way leaders operate so they can incorporate social, environmental, and financial priorities into their organizations. She runs group workshops, coaches individuals, and is a highly sought after keynote speaker. She also serves on the board of a number of organizations that are committed to having meaningful purpose. And about today's presentation, what's the difference between heroes and leaders? Speaking on collaborative leadership, Lorna will explain how our idolization of heroes is holding us back from solving big problems and shows why we need radical interdependence to make real change happen. So I'll ask a question since our group is fairly small. Do we want to do breakout rooms or do we want to stay together? I do have some follow-up questions we can ruminate on, or if people would like to do that in smaller groups, we can do that as well.
Stay together.
Did somebody say something?
Yeah.
I heard Esther say stay together. Is that right, Esther?
Yeah.
Thank you. Does that work for everybody else? Thank you, Esther. So what resonates for you from today's presentation?
I wonder
Jason,
what it has to do with the transition between Herr Pastor and the style of pastoring that we have now.
And I'd like to follow that on because that touches on the question I had. What style of pastoring do we have now? And have we left Herr Pastor behind?
Mm-hmm.
And in particular, for those pastors who are brought to a congregation that is in some way experiencing trauma or deep dysfunction, how do they avoid stepping into the hero role?
I have a pastor who's younger than I am. I've been in the church for 2 years since I moved. And he really, I'm in the deaconess community, and we had an assembly on inextricably connected. And so that is something that we believe in, that we are connected, even though we're miles apart from one another most of the time. But this pastor has a way of being vulnerable, being funny. You know, he knows I'm a retired CPE supervisor. He talks about his foibles and being a CPE student. He talks like that from the pulpit as well. You know, he's very human. He's very human. He's in his 40s and he's married with children. So and then now we have a vicar who is older, who this pastor is trying to get the vicar, and this pastor takes a day off every week. Friday is his day off, and that's announced. So he says he can't do it all. He can't do everything all week. This, I just enjoy it so much. It makes me feel very confident in his leadership. But the vicar is learning from him because he has been a workaholic and he wasn't in the church, he was in business. So I have those two models, you know. I mean, I've had many models, but right now in this time in my life, I have these two models of breaking away, you know, being, not doing or projecting this is who I am. You know, I remember when I first was a chaplain, I was scared to death. I was a trauma chaplain. And when that pager went off, I was scared to death. I did not want to be Ramona. I just wanted to be the chaplain, whatever that was. So I put her out there and hid myself behind the title. You know, I wasn't vulnerable. It took me a while to be vulnerable in that position, to feel safe enough to be in that position. I had a great boss. So my experience is my whole thing in teaching students, you know, in clinical pastoral education, was that would challenge them and be supportive of them. But if I challenged them, they had to learn how to be vulnerable. And I had to learn how to be vulnerable with them, just as I learned how to be vulnerable with my patients and family members. So I think that's something that is in the midst of ministry and outside of ministry. That's where I am. That's all I got for now.
Thank you, Ramona. Was anyone catching a theme from the previous two talks with Brene Brown and then Lorna Davis? Would anyone else like to comment on what resonated today before we move to the next question?
I think our society and our culture cultivates the hero additive. And one of the things that is very hard to distinguish is what is truth and what is culture. And our culture kind of constantly is bombarding us with, you can do it on your own, you can make this on your own. And you can see these little bubbles of interdependence and interconnectedness coming up. I feel like it's like a pot, you know, just about ready to boil, but it's really difficult to, in being married to a pastor, to kind of try to turn that corner to where you aren't supposed to be everything all the time to everyone. And yeah, it takes a lot of intention and awareness.
Absolutely. Jill, did you unmute?
Yeah, I was just thinking that, you know, I'm leading a group right now, and I have worked very hard to listen to what they have to say and not make this the Jill show. So I consciously try and provide opportunities for the sharing of ideas, and not to poo-poo any ideas that come up. So because even if it might not be appropriate right now, there might be a time when we can use those ideas. So but it has taken many years for me to get to this point, I have realized. So
Thank you. So how might the concepts presented today apply to the church, and specifically where and how you serve?
I really appreciated her comment that, you know, it takes longer and this is hard work when you're trying to change a culture. And I think just even the awareness, so I serve on a synod staff, so I'm aware whenever I walk into a room of a group of people, they kind of expect me to step into a leadership role and help direct the conversation. And so one of the things that I've been trying to do, and one of these is to think about what kind of processes can introduce that allow the ideas of the group to come up without me interfering with it. And so, for example, a practice that actually came from Dare to Lead, one of Brene Brown's pieces, is turn and learn, where everybody has to put their response and write it down on a Post-it note where no one can see it. And then you flip it over and share them together. But just trying to think about how we create processes that allow people share what they're thinking and their ideas before we influence, because even when we try not to influence, people are looking at us to expect us to influence, I think, when we're in ministry roles or leadership roles. And so just trying to think about simple techniques that help us do things like that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Tammy?
I've been working with some congregations on life of faith initiative, and that is really focusing back on the priesthood of all believers and the gifts of all believers. And so in some sense, trying to do that interdependence versus the hero approach. But it's tough work because as we've said, it's so integrated and expected that the pastor will do the work, and the rest will sit back. And in fact, when I said, the pastor said, "Do I need to be here?" at one point because I have a conflict, and I said, "No, actually, we'll be doing fine without you." And that was like, whoa. But that's part of the shift that I think it's going to take for us to reclaim what the waters of baptism have invited us to. And so anyway, we're new and young in this process, but it is the intention, I think, to move out of the hero approach and into the interdependent approach.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Margie, did you want to say something?
Well, just to build on what Beth said, what she was talking about, all of those kinds of strategies to build inclusion of everyone are good educational strategies. I'm a licensed professional counselor, so we learn how to, not just the counseling thing, but how to set up meetings so that everyone is included. We just did it at our ELCA business and leadership training, and I finally got it set up the way I've wanted it. Round circles and leading questions, and then everybody can discuss. You can discuss in the big group, or you discuss just in your table group. If you carry that further, which we also did in South Dakota with a couple years ago, we did round table discussions in each conference. And then after either the large group or the small table group discusses, then you put their responses up on the wall on big poster sheets. And then if you want to carry that further, then you go and give everybody little dots, sticky dots, different colors, and then they can go up and mark, like yellow is number 1. So everybody gets 3 dots, 3 yellow dots. They go up and can mark 3 number 1s. And then they get a red dot, that's number 2. And they go up and mark the ones that they want number 2. And it's it's a very good way to do strategic planning or to do any kind of committee or task force work where you want to gather the knowledge that your participants have and to get that out there, but then everybody still votes and everything gets, 1, 2, or 3 or 4, different colored dots, and that sets your priorities. So, you can do that. I detest meetings around a 6x8 long table because that already sets up a division. Same thing in church. When you have the pastor in front and the people here, you've already set up that barrier, that division. And so when you can work in circle groups, however you want to set that up, it's just, it's inclusion and it's interdependent. It is not the hero. But we set up, our church structure is set up in the hero fashion. So it's no wonder it's hard to break out of that. Because it's got a long history in the church. So anyway, for me, that's just good educational strategy for inclusion of everyone there and everyone's voice.
someone might respond to your, we're set up in a hero fashion that we have a hero religion. How do we deal with that?
We
Yeah,
also
that's
have,
the priest.
I just want to say, we also have a Trinity that is working within itself, herself, God's self. So we have one part of the Trinity that might be the hero, but all of them are working together in collaboration for our good.
I agree,
And that's what I
Ramona, but
think
how often do we hear that?
Oh, well, this is new stuff. I mean, we resist this. This is, this is something we resist. I mean, I'm a retired person. I'm an older person. I've been on a journey, but that's, I was just reading something about the Holy Spirit today. Oh, it's a Women's Gather magazine. They're doing a Bible study on the Holy Spirit, the wild goose chase. I just started reading that. And once again, it's this, collaborative God. And well, it's funny, we did wisdom, and I led one of the Bible studies on wisdom, and the women who are older also, they're older than me, had never heard that Sophia was so feminine, you know?
Yeah.
So that was a whole new thing. So when I was on worship planning, I said, we really need to do something about this. And, of course, I wound up going to preach, being the woman to preach a sermon, because we don't have that right now. And, we haven't, since I've been there in 2 years, we haven't had a woman preach. I suggested a retired pastor preach, but I guess she said no. And so I was next. But how do we change? How do we continue to change, to reform? How the Reformation, it's like it's constantly going on if we let it, but we get stuck.
Yeah, I love that John asked that question. And I just led a team coach training with the Nebraska Synod coaches yesterday. And I always start that training with a reading from 1 Corinthians 12, the body of Christ. And so John, I absolutely would respond to that saying, yes, we do have a hero, but let's listen to what makes up the body of Christ. It's all of us, and it includes everybody. And ELCA coaching is based on the belief that every single person is beloved of God, gifted specifically by God, and invited by God into God's work of loving and healing the world. And we believe this for individuals, and we also believe this for faith communities. And so in every coaching conversation, we're asking that question, what does this look like? And for me, the beautiful thing about that is that it takes into account all of these cultural sensitivities. We are blessed today to have a dear friend of mine, Innocent, who lives in Zimbabwe. And so some of what we're talking about would look very different for Innocent in his faith community. So Innocent, I want to invite you into this conversation. If it doesn't put you on the spot, and you can decline, but what would some of the people in your faith community say in response to some of these questions about how we work collaboratively and include everyone and not buy into hero worship? What would your faith community say about that?
Thanks, Jill. Thank you for inviting me, and also thank you. Greetings to you all. From where I stand, my culture, I think we are still. What can I say? Issue of inclusivity. Maybe let me just start by commenting what I had. I didn't come here. I didn't join you guys when the speaker was sharing, but I think there are two things that really resonated: the issue of heroism and dependence. Really, where what I was hearing from there, even from our perspective here in Zimbabwe. When you look at heroism, it's about self, about me. It's about what is happening. When I am a hero, it's about me. It all looks at me. When look at somebody who is standing on the pulpit, there is the hero. And when you look at interdependence, it's about us. It's about how do we move as a community? How do we understand? How do we understand the things that even the word? How do we interpret the word? So I think one of the things that is coming through even in our church now is the issue of involving all people. Like, for example, in a few hours ago, we were in a home group meeting. And how do we involve everyone? How do we listen to everyone? How do we, we are one family. So we still have that issue where there are people who are called maybe elders, pastors. We still, they have to be given their role, their responsibilities, whatever they do. But at the end of the day, like what Jill said, we are in the body of Christ. When we come to the throne of God, when we are now being, we asked, it's not about me, about the pastor, so I am higher up there, I was the congregant, I'm lower there. It's about how do we, as a community, how do we value each other? The issue of valuing each other, that's where interdependence comes through. Like she said, it's very difficult, really. Interdependence is difficult because I have to lower myself. I have to be vulnerable. I have to accept that I'm wrong. But when I'm a hero, everything that I say goes. So thank you. Thank you very much for letting me share.
Thank you, Innocent.
I'm wondering how we shape our liturgy affects this notion of hero and corporateness. And what some of you have seen done in the liturgy that it reinforces what we're talking about, a more participatory experience.
Yeah, John, I can share that the congregation that I'm connected with, one of the blessings, the unexpected blessings of COVID, is that it forced the worship service to go online and to engage participation of those listening online. After the sermon, the staff gathers on the altar, and at a distance, they unpack the sermon and they take live text messages and Facebook messages from the congregation. And so it's become this beautiful unpacking together that happens live, and it puts the staff people, Beth, I see you smiling, it puts those staff people really on their toes. And it's great because I think that everyone benefits, and it really helps us take what's shared in the sermon, and everyone really is left with thinking, how is this changing how I'm going to walk this week and the week after that, and how I'm interacting with my family, my neighbor, my world? So yeah, that's been one of the beautiful changes. And as we talked about people coming back to church, that was one component that everyone pushed on, is that we want that to stay. We want that participation to be a consistent part of what we do in worship.
Methinks your community probably violates the iron law. We can pray for 1 hour and no more.
Oh, I live in the land where the Green Bay Packers are at, and we have to be done if they're playing on Sunday at noon. So I think that they still adhere to that.
I'd like to ask another question, and of course you can answer any of these when you comment. Where might God be inviting you to take courageous steps toward collaborative leadership and away from heroic leadership?
I was thinking about our culture when the woman was speaking, and I was really moved when she shared about how she really was striving for that hero role early on in her life, and what she thought leadership was about. And then now that she just so intentionally seeks out the connection and the help from others, asking for help. And I was thinking about that. I think it's like a Bonnie Tyler song. I need a hero. I'm waiting for a hero. You know, it's kind of funny, but like our culture, so it seems like so many of us, we really do, like, we want that hero in like a political figure or whatever. You know, we want someone to be the one that's going to fix it all and do, you know, everything, which is just I don't know why we're like that. And so I guess for me, I just wonder and think about when we feel called specifically to be leaders, you know, like a call to be a leader is a call to, you know, I mean, we all have a call, I think. I was thinking of that Romans 1:11. And so what does that mean for people like us that are like, okay, I identify under that term leader, and acknowledging that lots of times that means I want to be the hero and I want to be the one talking. I do not want to be the one talking, clearly, in front of others. But like, that's sort of what she was saying, right? Like, I'm the one in charge. I'm going to fix it. Here I am. And people are like really drawn to that too. So how can we include the people that maybe don't feel called to be leaders, with still honoring what their role may or may not be? As I don't know if the word follower, I'm not saying the word follower as like, you know, hierarchical, but if that makes sense, I don't know. I'm just sort of, that's just what's striking me right now.
Yeah, thank you. It makes me wonder about how we define leader.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Everybody is a leader in some format, but that's a different type of leadership than the hero. And so it does come back to what's your definition of leader and leadership.
I agree with both of you that her terminology, she said interdependent leader. We still need leaders, but we're redefining how they interact and what their role is. And some things will land on that person's shoulders for them to do. And that becomes, I think, the challenge is which of those things properly belong to that interdependent leader to carry out, and which belong to a collective group or to other individuals. So it's complicated.
When she names it, it's complex, right? And I love that she talked about interdependent leaders invite. So it's sort of a constant invitational. So like what you said, Carol, absolutely, we all play a part, but it's not the heroic, oh, and our pastor, for example, is going to take on 90% of this because we pay them, or whatever the thought process is.
I think one of the keys that I took from this is that you can be in that leadership role, but you cannot go in with the I can fix it attitude. Or I have identified the problem, so therefore I'm going to fix it. That you have to have that discussion as to what are the needs, and then you develop that leadership within that group to how best to meet those needs. I think we have a tendency to think that we know it all and can fix it all, and we just can't.
I was before I was a deaconess, before I was a chaplain, I was a liturgical dance leader, but I backed up into that. I knew I had choreography, but I didn't know how to teach anyone. People had to teach me how to teach them. That was my model of education, is that your students teach you how to teach them. And I think that's something we need in the church. That I'm sorry, the woman who was talking about listening to her congregation, is like, we find out where people are and we see what we can all do together. There was someone in our dance group who made the outfits for us, someone who drove us to our destinations, someone who made sandwiches. Everybody had a piece of the action. All I had was I knew the movement. I didn't even know how to teach it, and I didn't know what shape it should be in. But as a group, we did it together.
I wonder how much the pandemic because it was a crisis that happened so suddenly, so unexpectedly. I wonder how much that has set us back into hero leader mode.
I wonder about how like the more people we invite into our the more people we invite into the conversation, like if you're discerning or dreaming of a vision, and the more voices involved, it kind of can take on a life of its own. I'm thinking back to experiences where I was responsible for a project, right? And there was a condition of connecting with your community to find stakeholders in that project, but I was responsible for that project. Well, I come back to my community after receiving this training, and turns out there's people have a vision that's bolder than what I was comfortable with. So I was really out of my comfort zone because I'm like, oh no, like you don't want to do that. They're like, what do you mean? Particularly around community organizing, this was around climate change. So I was like, no, I really think we should just do something more safe in my head, because as a leader of the project, it's on me. But in order to do community organizing, you're doing that with other people in the community. And sometimes, like, I think God calls us to bigger visions than we're really willing to engage. And you need that community to take it to the next level. And I think back to also being in a congregational pastor, you know, you sit down with the team and the leaders and you're thinking, okay, what are we going to do for this event? And they want to do a community event that was 10 times the capacity, what I might have suggested, particularly around a neighborhood ministry. And so just seeing how, like, if we just stay alone in that hero mode, it's really costing us what the potential is, and how, because I could not have done, I think at that time it was like an event feeding. I was like, how are we going to feed? Like, how are we even going to get 100 people to come to this event? How, let alone feed them if they come? And God is faithful in helping equip our team to be able to have even just like 10 volunteers feed 100 people and exceed that. So I've just seen like that. If it's just left to me, I'm kind of fearful and just want to hide. And maybe kind of entertain the idea of maybe some project, but it just gets bigger the more people who really engage. So that's what the video kind of was getting me to think about, especially when she was talking about conservation. When you're talking about climate change, I mean, that's a global complex issue. It's not one person.
Thank you, Christy. I'm curious, before we wrap up, Andreas, you haven't shared yet. Would you like to?
Here we go. Yeah, I was just thinking about Ramona, actually, when you shared about your liturgical dance and learning, you know, teaching that. We've had an idea about developing a community garden, and we have a food bank on our campus, which is part of the whole city, but it is on our campus. And so there are people who come here who are food insecure, who may or may not have a place for a garden. And so I've just said, well, you know, I thought I was interested in that. One of my parishioners, one Sunday after the service, we had announcements. He said, can I come up to the front? And he stepped up to the microphone and he said, you know, I want to talk about this community garden idea. And my son is a landscaper, and here's what he can bring to it. And so since then, I've just kind of been looking around and visiting other churches that do have a community garden. And my wife actually got to one of those ahead of me. When I got there, they said, oh, you're the learner. I said, what? She says, yeah, your wife is here. She's the professional gardener. You're the learner. I said, oh yeah, that's right. That's me. And then they started just sharing, this is how it works for us. And we charge people so much. And like, charge them. Oh, okay. Didn't know about, what is that all about? Well, you have to pay for the water. There's other things that have to be paid for. And I said, oh, okay. And people are able to do. So anyway, I have no idea how it's going to work out for our area. And so it's just hearing the sharing today. It's like, feel like this will be, I'm looking forward to seeing what happens.
Wonderful.
And I see myself as just kind of, maybe the guy that keeps saying, hey, look at what's happening here. Look what's happening here. And let's see what happens here.
Yeah, thank you, Andreas. So I'd like to invite you to join us again on Wednesday, October 6th, as we spend a majority of our time in breakout rooms based on topics related to courageous leadership. You'll be able to choose which topic and room you go to that day. As we close, I invite you to continue sharing in the chat area what encouragement or faithful step you're taking with you today. And I'd like to invite Jill to close us out.
Yeah, so thank you for this rich time of sharing. It's fun when it's a small enough group that we get to stay like this together and get to hear the wisdom of one another. As I've listened to this this person present now twice. Jason shared this TED Talk with me. And one of the things that it reminds me from in my own life is being a church leader, the time when I was completely stripped of my ability to be that person who was upfront, who had the answers, who could swoop in and finish the things that weren't getting done. And that was when my 20-year-old son died. It shifted the paradigm in our congregation. Suddenly the person that was, I called myself a sweeper. I was the one that I couldn't stand things not being done. And so if things weren't getting picked up and taken care of, I would come behind and sweep them all up. In this just incredible state of grief, I was completely unable to do that for a long time. And in fact, there was a lot of question about, is Jill even going to be able to come back? When I very first started coming back, I couldn't even stand to go through the church doors because that was the door that the casket of my son came through. My God, how could I step through those doors, right? So I snuck up the fire escape and came in my office that way. And the day that I could finally stand to come into the sanctuary again, the place where my son's funeral service happened, I remember going up front and thinking, I have to thank these good people because they were showing up with food and helping me even just find clothes to wear and laundry. There were so many things that got done that I didn't know how they even got done because the people of my faith community were stepping in and making it happen. And so I chose the Gospel of John to read to them, the first chapter. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And I looked at everybody in the congregation and I said, you have been the light of Christ shining back to me. And this is how we navigate life. We praise God together and we grieve together. And something shifted in that congregation after Josh died. And I had to grieve in a very public way. And we kind of linked arms and did it together. I became a different leader. I was forced into that. And there was a lot of learning that happened for me and for those that I served with. And so I guess that I leave that image with you about the potential, because the thing that happened is that people stepped up and started sharing their gifts in ways that they maybe never would have, because the sweeper was there to take care of things. And so even in the worst of circumstances, there is that God-given opportunity and potential. And so I encourage you as you go through this next week to look for that. It doesn't have to be something traumatic like a loss like that. It can be little ways. But and in the chat area, Jamie and I were talking about that. For me, part of the equation is a consistent stream of invitation and affirmation when you see those gestures being made. And just know that spirit is there, spirit shows up, and God is already out there in the future, wherever it is that you're being called to. Yeah. So thank you for this time, friends. It's been beautiful. We look forward to seeing you October 6th. Yeah. God bless you.